10 strange little known unsolved mysteries. The bizarre, the unusual, the amazing, the unexplained. These strange subjects continue to fascinate us, don't they? Since we can't get enough, in a follow-up to a previous list, here are 10 more unsolved mysteries we don't hear about every day. 10. The mysterious ghost ship of the Arctic, 1931. The seas of the world have always been full of mystery, wonder, and often just plain weirdness. One of the more bizarre phenomena of the high seas is the occurrence of various ghost ships throughout history, vessels that are adrift at sea, wandering about without any discernible living crew. Spooky stories of ghost ships have pervaded the lore of the sea for centuries, and they have become a fixture of any discussion on truly weird goings-on upon the ocean. Ghost ships typically fall into two categories: those that are purportedly phantom ships powered by unknown supernatural forces or piloted by ghost crews, and those that are derelicts with crews that have vanished, often under mysterious and unexplainable circumstances. Usually it is fairly easy to discern the two, yet there are cases where it cannot be readily determined if we are looking at a simple derelict or something more supernatural, and indeed more sinister in nature. One of the more bizarre ghost ship cases on record must surely be that of the SS Baychimo, which has actually transcended the designation as a mere ghost ship and gone on to become one of the greatest and most enduring modern-day maritime mysteries. The SS Baychimo was a steel-hulled 1,322-ton, steam-powered vessel that started its life in Sweden when it was constructed in 1914. Its career as an ocean-going cargo ship started under the name Methuen for a German shipping company, where it spent some time as a trading vessel operating between Hamburg and Sweden until World War I began. In the aftermath of the war, the ship was transferred to Britain as war reparations for losses the Germans had cost British shipping, and it was rechristened the Baychimo. The Baychimo was acquired by the Hudson's Bay Company and was based in Scotland, from where it was sent across the Atlantic to the north coast of Canada and carrying cargo such as furs and pelts between trading posts across the frigid, icy waters of the Arctic. The ship was mostly used to trade provisions for fur with Inuit settlements, but it also made voyages to Alaska and British Columbia carrying various cargo and passengers. The Baychimo and its crew performed their duties well, braving rough, frigid seas, foul weather, and perilous ice flows to perform a total of 9 successful journeys to and from Alaska and British Columbia across less than calm waters. On October 1, 1931, the ship's luck would run out. The Baychimo was on a routine transport run to Vancouver with a cargo of valuable furs. However, the crew had not accounted for the fact that winter had come earlier than usual that year. The ship and its crew were tossed about by icy blasts of wind and gripped by freezing temperatures, yet they pressed on, determined to deliver their precious cargo. Even as they pushed on through the ominous weather and menacingly choppy seas, a sudden blizzard descended upon the ship and brought with it chunks of pack ice that began to surround the Baychimo and its terrified crew. The ship became trapped by the circling ice floes, which closed in around it and gripped it in a cage of ice as their helpless crew looked on. Unable to continue their voyage, and facing a possible sinking ship, the captain ordered the crew to abandon the ship and make their way to the town of Barrow on foot, which was about a mile of treacherous, shifting ice floes away. They were able to make it to their destination and took shelter in Barrow for 2 days before returning to check on the status of their abandoned ship. When they arrived, they were surprised to find that the vessel had broken free of the ice in their absence and was aimlessly drifting about the area. The crew decided to wait until they could retrieve the ship, and built a camp out on the ice nearby where they could keep an eye on it. Unfortunately for the Baychimo's crew, the foul weather did not let up, and on October 8, the ship was mired in ice once again. This time, the ice was more reluctant to let go, and the ship remained ensconced within its cold prison with no sign of being freed anytime soon. On October 15, with the blizzard continuing to pound their camp, the Hudson Bay Company took action and sent a rescue party to evacuate the crew from their imperiled camp by aircraft. Although 22 of the crew were rescued, The captain and 14 crew members refused to abandon their ship and its cargo, and opted to remain camped out on the ice despite the punishing storm. Receiving provisions from the company, they were prepared to stubbornly wait out the entire winter if that was what it took. On November 24th, a particularly vicious blizzard swept in and visibility in the swirling clouds of snow became non-existent. The crew that had remained behind lost sight of the ship, and when the storm lifted the following day, the Baychimo was nowhere to be seen. The vessel had simply vanished. Considering the severity of the storm that had hit them and the fact that there was no trace of the Baychimo in the vicinity, the captain and crew assumed that the ship had broken apart and sunk into the dark, frigid depths. The dejected crew decided to pack up their camp and head back to civilization. Imagine the crew's surprise when a week later, a native Inuit seal hunter scoffed at the idea that the ship had sunk and told them that he had just seen it floating around a few days prior, not 45 miles from where it had been trapped in the ice. The crew excitedly packed up their gear again and headed out to see if they could retrieve their lost ship. Luck was on their side, and they managed to track down the Baychimo exactly where the hunter had said it would be, and they eagerly boarded. After an examination of the Baychimo's condition, the captain decided that it had been too badly damaged by its ordeal in the ice, and was unlikely to remain seaworthy through the winter. It was surmised that the vessel would soon break apart and sink, so the crew frantically salvaged some of the more valuable furs they had been transporting and had them airlifted by the Hudson Bay Company, after which the ship was abandoned and left to its inevitable fate. The Baychimo was obviously tougher than its captain had given it credit for, because it did indeed survive the winter, and began its ascent into the annals of sea legend. People began to report seeing the ship cruising about the cold North Atlantic waters, totally intact and seemingly unmanned. The first such sighting came when a dog sledder heading for Nome, Alaska, spotted the ship adrift near shore, and the number of sightings took off from there. The path of the Baychimo was unpredictable and erratic, with the ship sometimes being seen near shore but at other times far out to sea, and it was sighted alternately in both open water and trapped within ice, in wildly disparate locations. In addition to the sightings, there were those who tried to approach the ship only for it to seem to elude pursuit uncannily well for a vessel without a crew. On occasion, the Baychimo was reported to simply vanish from view before it could be reached. Those that did actually manage to catch up with the elusive ship had little success in their endeavors to actually board it. Every attempt to board the derelict vessel was thwarted in some way, and every crew that tried were forced to let it go for one reason or another. Sometimes, the pursuers were simply not equipped to handle the task of salvaging the massive vessel, but other times failure came under more mysterious circumstances. It was reported that it was common for sudden and violent storms to move in without warning upon any move to board a ship, and it is said that quite a few people lost their lives trying. One group of Inuits that once boarded the ghost ship in 1933 for shelter as it was caught in ice ended up being trapped within its walls for 10 days as a sudden, fierce storm raged outside. Other times when people managed to get on board, ice floes would appear out of the surrounding waters like sharks drawn to a whale carcass, and made any hope of salvage impossible. In addition, tow lines connected to the Baychimo often snapped either due to rough seas, jagged ice, or even at times for no apparent reason at all, and all of this gave the distinct and eerie impression that the wayward Baychimo did not want to be boarded. Due to the difficulties that all who tried had in their efforts to board or salvage the ship, the Baychimo over the years accrued a reputation as being a cursed vessel, a bad omen, and by 1939 there were many ships that would flee rather than approach upon sighting it. In 1939, after another failed attempt to board it, the Baychimo disappeared into the cold expanse of the Arctic for the next 23 years. It was thought that the ship had finally run out of whatever power had kept it going all those years and finally sunk, but in March 1962, a group of Inuits saw it drifting along near the coastline of the Beaufort Sea. The ship had returned from wherever it had gone. The mysterious ship was subsequently sighted several more times up to 1969, when it was seen stuck in a pack of ice, as it was wont to do. It would be the last time anyone would see the ship. When a salvage party came to investigate the 1969 report of the Baychimo in ice, it had vanished by the time anyone arrived. No one has seen it since. After this 1969 account, it was widely believed that this time, the sea had finally conquered the vessel and that it had sunk, but no trace of wreckage was ever found despite a few searches for it in the area where it was last seen. In 2006, there was resurgence in interest in the mysterious fate of the Baychimo, and the government of Alaska announced its intentions to locate the vessel. So far, they have found nothing, not even so much as a scrap. It is as if the ship has just vanished without a trace from the face of the earth. The fate of the Baychimo and her cargo, which is still in her hold untouched, remain unknown. What happened to this ship? Did the sea finally claim it? Was it salvaged without anyone knowing about it? Or is it still out there cutting through the Arctic waters of the far north, perhaps with some unfathomable intent of its own? Until it emerges from hiding to be sighted again, or someone finds the wreckage, the ultimate fate of this ghost ship of the Arctic will remain beyond our grasp. 9. Pascagoula's Phantom Barber 1942. History is peppered with strange accounts of phantom attackers. These mystery assailants attack, stir up a massive panic, and then disappear as mysteriously as they come. Many, like the legendary Spring-Heeled Jack, are clearly more fiction than fact, but now and then an outbreak of strange behavior is rooted in genuine criminal activity. The panic surrounding the London Monster, for example, likely grew out of legitimate attacks on women in 18th-century London streets. A phantom attacker similar to the London Monster stalked the streets of Pascagoula, Mississippi during World War II, preying on women and girls. His particular perversion involved cutting hair, leading locals to dub him the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula. A mysterious assailant. The year was 1942. America was at war. As her men and boys went off to fight in foreign fields, her towns geared themselves up to produce the materiel the troops would need to win the war. The small town of Pascagoula was no exception. Indeed, the war was a boom time for the town. Its population increased by 15,000 in just 2 years. Pascagoula was involved in the manufacture of warships, a crucial industry for a nation involved in a war on 2 oceans. However, the influx of so many people into what was once such a small town led to tensions. It was the perfect recipe for a panic, what with the social upheaval and the specter of warfare hanging overhead. Soon enough, there was indeed a panic, one that seems similar in many ways to the Mad Gasser of Methuen episode, which has become a textbook case of mass hysteria. The attacks began in early June 1942, when the Phantom Barber cut the hair of Mary Evelyn Briggs and Edna Marie Heidel in their bedroom at the Convent of Our Lady of Victories. By the end of that week, 3 people received unwanted haircuts at the shears of the Phantom Barber. None saw their attacker. The town was understandably in a panic. It got to the point where the army even modified its blackout regulations. Blackouts were procedures to defend against air raids, in order to help police hunt the barber. The Phantom Barber primarily struck on Monday and Friday evenings, and entered through a slit in window screens. The Phantom Barber strikes again. A week after the first attack, the Phantom Barber struck the home of David G. Petey, shearing his daughter Carol's hair. The parents found a bare footprint near the window. The following Friday, the attacks became violent. The Phantom allegedly entered the house of Mr. and Mrs. St. Heidelberg, and proceeded to beat them with an iron bar. The final attack happened on a Sunday, 2 weeks later. The Phantom clipped a 2-inch lock of hair from the head of Mrs. R.R. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor reported a sickening smell and something being pressed to her face, which authorities assumed to be a chloroform rag. All told, about 10 homes were broken into during the Phantom Barber's reign of terror. In August, the police apprehended a suspect that they concluded was the Phantom Barber. His name was William Dolan, a 57-year-old German chemist with reported German sympathies and a grudge against the Heidelbergs. Mr. Heidelberg's father was a local judge who had refused to lower Dolan's bail on a trespassing charge several months before. Dolan was charged with the attempted murder of the Heidelbergs, but curiously he was never charged with one of the Phantom Barber attacks, despite the FBI finding a bundle of human hair behind his house, some of which belonged to Carol Petrie, who you will remember was the barber's fourth victim. Dolan denied being the Phantom Barber. He received 10 years for the attempted murder charge. After his arrest, the Phantom Barber attacks ceased. It isn't clear whether Dolan really was the barber though. His attack was uncharacteristically violent compared to the barber's attacks. It could be argued that the barber attacks were practice runs leading up to the assault on the Heidelbergs, but if that were the case, why do another barber-style attack after the Heidelberg assault? Also, if they were practice runs, why cut hair? It sounds like something sexually motivated, a hair fetish perhaps. If that were the case and Dolan were the assailant, why keep his prizes in the backyard? Also, it doesn't seem that the footprint in Carol Petrie's room was ever analyzed, a definite oversight on the part of the police. As is often happens, there are no definitive answers in this case. It is certainly possible that a pervert with a hair fetish was stalking the streets of Pascagoula. Whether that pervert was William Dolan, or another man who decided to book it out of town once authorities snapped up Dolan and his name was linked to the attacks, remains unknown. The identity of the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula will remain a mystery. 8. The Bleeding House 1987. Just before midnight on September 8, 1987, Minnie Winston stepped out of her bath and into the strangest night of her life. The 77-year-old noticed a strange, red spill on the bathroom floor. As she was about to inspect the unusual puddle, she noticed that the walls in her bathroom also had the same reddish stain mysteriously oozing from its surface. She stepped outside and saw that the hallway floor also had pools of the reddish substance blotted across the tiles. "Will," she called out. "Come look at all this red stuff coming out of the floors." For a split second Minnie panicked when her husband didn't reply. At 79 years of age, Minnie's husband's health was fragile and needed professional medical care. William Winston had to be hooked up to a dialysis machine every day to have his blood cleansed, and the process would leave him exhausted each day. Minnie's fear turned into a wild confusion when her husband appeared at the other end of the hallway. He was in clean clothes with no visible signs of blood anywhere on his body. He stood looking at the red blobs between them both. The expression on his wife's face mimicked his own. Whose blood was it? The Winstons were confused and understandably terrified. Not knowing what to do, they placed a call to the police station, asking them to come and check out their home and the mysterious appearance of blood. Detective Steve Cartwright investigated the 6-bedroom brick house on the south side of Atlanta. The police searched the premises but were unable to find any signs of a break-in or someone hiding in the property. Given the amount of blood at the property, there were two things that Detective Cartwright was sure about that night: that what they were looking at was in fact blood, and that it didn't come from the Winstons. In over 22 years of residence in 1114 Fountain Drive, both Minnie and William had never experienced anything like they had that Tuesday night in 1987. Pools of blood were found in their kitchen, as well as in their living room. It was on the floor of their bedroom, on the walls, and under appliances. Given the amount of blood they found, it appeared to have been placed, or dripped, on the spot from a very lively source. In other words, someone inside their home had been bleeding profusely. However, there was no one inside the house besides the septuagenarian couple, who neither had blood or cuts visibly on their bodies. Even when questioned about her husband's recent blood work, Minnie assured the officers that all aspects of the treatment were done at a medical facility, not inside their home. Dumbfounded, the police collected samples of the blood and submitted it to their lab for further analysis. It was now a waiting game for Minnie and her husband as they went to bed every night wondering whose blood had been smeared on the floors and walls of their home. A few days after their initial discovery, Detective Cartwright visited the residence to deliver news that neither he nor the Winstons would come to understand. The lab results concluded that it was human blood what was collected inside the Winstons' home. Furthermore, it was from someone with type O blood. When the detective asked, Minnie stated that it wasn't hers, as hers was not that same type. She then went on to tell him that her husband's blood type was A, which was confirmed by the medical facility that treated Mr. Winston. They were back where they had started. The blood type didn't match the residents of the house, and given the amount of blood that oozed through the floors and walls, Detective Cartwright could only surmise that the blood did not come from the Winstons. So the question still remained. Whose blood was it? When the story broke through small headlines in 1987, Minnie and William received a lot of unwanted attention from the press and independent investigators. There were unwanted phone calls and knocks to their house at all hours of the day. The elderly couple kept to their word and stated over and over again that the blood did not belong to them and that it was in no way a hoax. "I still don't know where the blood came from," Minnie said in an interview a few days after the lab results were revealed. "And I'm tired of all these people asking me all these questions. If anybody comes here today, I'm not going to open my door." The Atlanta police never figured out where the blood came from and who it came out of. Minnie and William Winston never experienced any further spontaneous blood incidents in the house that came to be known as the Bleeding House. 7. The Guyra Ghost 1921. The case of the Guyra Ghost, or rather Poltergeist, began in April 1921 with tremendous thumpings on the walls followed by showers of stones which eventually broke every window in the tiny weatherboard cottage just outside Guyra. Nobody could see who or what was creating the mayhem, but it was soon noticed the attacks seemed to be focused on 12-year-old Minnie. Stones smashed through her bedroom window and fell on her bed. Apparently one of the Bowen children confessed to tossing some rocks on the roof to scare a younger sibling, but this didn't seem to account for the extent of the phenomenon, especially as these things kept happening even when the place was surrounded by policemen. Local residents, many of whom had observed the phenomena at the Bowens, became quite jittery. Some took to sleeping with loaded guns at hand. One young girl was wounded in the head and several other people narrowly escaped being shot. The local police sergeant, who sat up night after night at the cottage amid the interminable thumps and showers of stones, broke under the strain and was sent away for arrest. Alarmed at the dangerous situation that was developing, the state government sent a team of detectives from Sydney. They maintained a constant surveillance of the stressed but cooperative Bowen family, interrogated a large number of Guyra residents and organized teams of up to 80 armed volunteers. But, despite a double cordon around the house, the mighty thumping continued, sufficient to shake the cottage to its foundations and audible to watchers 100 yards from the house. To those outside, the thumping appeared to come from within. To those inside, it seemed to come from outside. At its peak, the Guyra Ghost created international interest. One of the people drawn to the remote township by the mystery was a certain Mr. Moores, a personal friend of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who shared his interest in psychic phenomena. Given full access to the house, he removed portions of the roof to create lookout posts and set an elaborate system of traps. Completely unimpressed, the ghost continued its maddening mayhem. Moores and his 5 assistants were completely flummoxed. They couldn't even say for sure whether the walnut-sized stones were thrown from inside or outside the house. But where the foreign expert failed, a local ghostbuster may have partially succeeded. When Ben Davy of Urala, a student of spiritualism and theosophy, visited the Bowen household, he learned that May, a daughter of Mrs. Bowens by a former marriage, had died about 3 months earlier. As he told the Sunday Times later, he immediately suspected the spirit of the dead girl was trying to communicate with young Minnie. After a spate of knockings, A tearful Minnie confessed that May had spoken to her, saying, "Tell mother not to worry, I'll watch and guard over you all." Then all poltergeist activity ceased. At least for a while. When, to the despair of all, the thumpings and stone falls recommenced, Minnie's parents, in desperation, sent her to her grandmother's house in Glen Innes 60 kilometers away. Proof that she really had been the focus of the polt's attention was soon provided. It followed her there. The second house was situated in town, but the wall-shaking thumps were as difficult to explain as ever. Some thumps were heavy enough to dislodge ornaments on a sideboard. When a 200-pound man threw his full weight against the wall next to the sideboard, the ornaments did not even shake. After a time, Minnie's parents brought her back to the Guyra cottage. Thereafter, it seems, the strange phenomena simply faded away. Nowadays, it is hard to find any resident of Guyra who knows much about the story that pushed the little town into the limelight so many years ago. The two houses involved in the mystery still stand, although the Bowen residence has been enlarged and renovated. The current occupants, though a little nervous when they moved in, have never heard a peep out of the ghost. 12-year-old Minnie appears to have been a typical poltergeist medium, the kind of troubled adolescent who very often seems to be the focus and possibly the unconscious instigator of some polter attacks. A Sunday Times journalist considered her a rather odd little girl. Minnie is tall, thin and dark, with peculiar dark, introspective eyes that never seem to miss any movement in a room. When she speaks to you, she never smiles and seems to look beyond or through you. She has a rather uncanny aptitude for anticipating questions, almost before they are asked. Minnie Bowen grew up, married and, as Mrs. Inks, lived for many years, apparently normally, in Armidale. If she knew more about the Guyra ghost, there is no record of her telling anyone about it in later life. In about 1988 or 89, the elderly, slow-moving lady was run over and killed, just outside Armidale. A silent movie was made about the incident in 1921 entitled The Guyra Ghost Mystery. John Cosgrove starred in and directed the film. The Bowens themselves appeared in the picture. 6. Eleonore ZUGUN, the Ghost Girl of Romania 1925. In 1926, Europe was captivated by the story of Eleonore ZUGUN, a 13-year-old illiterate peasant from Romania, afflicted with stigmata and possibly possessed by the devil. Eleonore began showing signs of demonic possession in her pubescent years. She would hurtle herself across the room, and send objects flying into the air, through what her family believed was telekinesis. She also developed strange scratches and bite marks on her body, wounds that her family did not believe were self-inflicted. The ZUGUNs sought help from a local priest, and Eleonore was sent to the convent of Gorovi. There they performed a full exorcism, but the strange phenomena continued. Desperate for help, Eleonore's family sent her to a mental asylum. Luckily for Eleonore, a rich countess, Zoe Wasilko-Sirecki, heard about her plight. Fascinated by the supernatural, the countess rescued Eleonore from the asylum and offered her a home, so she could study the unusual girl. Eleonore traveled with the countess to London, where she became the toast of underground paranormal research societies. They photographed evidence of what they believed were stigmata marks on Eleonore's arms and hands, and recorded the countess's own experiences with Eleonore's telekinetic abilities. In the home the countess and Eleonore shared, heavy furniture would sail across the room, or move unexpectedly. According to the countess, a stiletto high-heeled shoe flew across the room and into the wall, and an inkpot shook itself all over guests. Despite being totally illiterate, Eleonore was reportedly possessed by bouts of automatic writing. During such episodes, she would grab a pencil and paper and feverishly write incoherent Romanian. One letter revealed the location of a lost set of keys, which the countess's secretary had misplaced. It wasn't long before researchers began to raise doubts about the veracity of the countess's claims. Then known as the Ghost Girl of Romania, Eleonore was visited by multiple psychologists. A doctor by the name of Hans Rosenbusch claimed that he saw the Countess purposefully scratch Eleanore on the neck while pretending to brush her hair. He declared Eleanore was a hoax. The Countess sued him for libel in 1927. By this point, however, Eleanor's strange behavior had quieted. In 1928, after her first period, all of Eleanor's troubles reportedly ceased entirely. She moved back to Romania, got married, and lived out the rest of her days without incident. Additional aspects of Eleanor's life surfaced in the following years, shedding new light on the case. Apparently, under the Countess's care, Eleanore revealed she had been the victim of sexual assault at a very young age. Many theorized she developed an obsession with the devil because of this traumatic event, as a way to channel her rage. Whatever was really going on with Eleanor's ZUGUN, the ghost girl of Romania, her case has continued to loom large in the annals of demonic possession lore. 5. Angelo Faticoni, the Human Cork, early 20th century. During the 1930s, the world was witness to one of the most bizarre beings who ever lived. At a time when economic hard times clouded the hopes and dreams of people everywhere, there emerged from bleak obscurity an Italian-born American whose incredible feats with his body were the talk of small towns and cities throughout the land. Angelo Faticoni had been aware of his special gifts since early childhood. It wasn't until he was an adult, however, that he began capitalizing on what Mother Nature had bestowed him, the phenomenal ability to remain buoyant for long periods of time, even with enormous loads of iron and steel anchored to his body. Faticoni, or the Human Cork, as the press and adoring fans called him, could sleep in water, roll up in a ball, lie on his side or assume virtually any position asked of him. Once, according to an article that appeared in the New York Herald Tribune, the wiry, bearded contortionist was sewn into a bag and then thrown head down into frigid waters with a 20-pound cannonball lashed to his legs. His head reappeared on the surface soon afterwards, the article noted, and he remained motionless in that position for 8 hours. On another occasion, the Human Cork swam across the Hudson River tied to a chair weighted with lead. There seemed to be no end to the number of unnatural positions he could assume in water or to the amount of time he could remain afloat, treading on water motionlessly with heights strapped around his waist, back and ankles. One witness remarked that he assumed dead man's position as his frail body, eyes closed and hands clenched across his chest, bobbed and drifted upon the surface. For years doctors sought an explanation to the Human Cork's uncanny physical skills, but they were unsuccessful. Once, during a visit to Harvard University, he allowed medical authorities to examine him thoroughly before plunging into a pool weighted down with pounds of lead. While he floated of bone-chilling hours, the doctors observing him failed to find support for earlier theories suggesting he was able to float at such great length due to abnormal internal organs. Unlike Harry Houdini and other artists of the day, Faticoni's acts were real, uncontrived, with no hidden wires or strings supporting his body while it floated, feather-like, upon the surface of rivers, lakes, pools, and even oceans before the startled gaze of thousands of onlookers. How did he do it? That's what the world wanted to know. Newspaper reporters hounded him wherever he went, begging for his secret. Investigators, convinced he was a fraud, hoax, probed, measured and timed his performances. Preachers railed that he was in cahoots with the devil. Psychics asserted that Faticoni somehow drew his strength and extraordinary talents from the spirit world. Before his death in 1931, Faticoni promised to reveal the secret of how he became the Human Cork. Newspapers, responding to reader interest, ran stories almost on a daily basis about the Human Cork and his mystical abilities. All wanted to know, when will he reveal his secret? In the summer of 1931, Faticoni died while visiting relatives in Jacksonville. On August 31st, the headline on his obituary in a New York paper read, "Human Cork is dead. His circuit unrevealed." So was Angelo Faticoni, a man of mystery? whatever secret powers he might have possessed, enabling him to turn himself into the human cork that went to his grave with him. 4. Lost boy Larry, August 1973. August 7, 1973 will remain a day of mystery and possible tragedy. Several people in New Mexico that day, using CB radios, heard the disturbing cries for help from a little boy. He said his name was Larry, and that he was trapped in a red and white pickup truck. He was with his father, who he thinks had a heart attack and was dead. He said that they had been on a rabbit hunting trip when his father collapsed on the steering wheel. Larry claimed that the truck had flipped over into a ravine and both doors were jammed and he was unable to escape. The boy's signal faded in and out over the next few days, and was also heard in California, Wyoming, and Arizona. In a panic, Larry began to flip between channels, crying for help. Police began a search and rescue team. One helicopter pilot who was searching the Manzano Mountains in New Mexico for Larry says that he made contact with a little boy calling for help, but he called himself David, not Larry. A family traveling from Missouri was reported missing on August 11th, and they had a son named Larry, but they were eventually found. On August 12th, an Army sergeant claimed to have spoken to the boy for 3 hours, but could not get him to give more information about himself, phone number, address, etc. No more contact could be made with Larry. It is presumed his battery died. The search was called off on August 13th. The police stated that there was no concrete evidence. They also say that the boy, if real, may have died sooner than the transmissions stopped, and that the subsequent transmissions from different states, some were even heard in Canada, were hoaxes. Many believe it was a hoax, but those who spoke to Larry swear to this day that it wasn't. That the emotion, and the crying, they heard from little Larry was no doubt the real thing. So what do you think? Was it an elaborate prank? Or did little Larry die alone in the mountains, still lost to this day? 3. The Methuen Water Demon 1963. The Martin family's ordeal in Methuen, Massachusetts began in October when Francis, his wife, and children first noticed a damp patch on the wall in the den. While they watched, the patch grew larger. A moment later, they heard a popping sound and a drenching spout of extremely cold water began spewing from the wall. Francis Martin immediately ruled out frozen pipes. Temperatures weren't freezing, and he'd recently had the drains cleaned. The inexplicable water spout continued to stream a few seconds before it stopped. The next day, a second spot in another location began to spew water like a fountain. The spray lasted less than half a minute and ceased. The phenomena continued over several more days, with new icy water streams occurring at 15-minute intervals in various rooms throughout the house, soaking floors, furniture, and occupants. A deputy witnessed a water jet burst out of a wall and spray 2 feet into the room. When the Martins moved into a relative's house, that place was also inflicted with mysterious water streams from the walls. Returning his family to their own home, Francis Martin had the water turned off at the mains. The next day, water spouts began to explode from the plaster walls, often from several spots simultaneously. Gallons of water poured out in 20-second intervals, but the source remained unknown. The Martins moved away again, but were forced to return to Methuen when the water demon followed them. Gradually, the phenomena tapered off and stopped altogether. The family never discovered what caused the frightening activity. The official explanation? Moisture buildup. 2. The Black Flash of Provincetown 1939. A common feature in the world of the strange and paranormal is that of the phantom being. Throughout history there have been various stories, tales, and reports of bizarre, mysterious shadowy figures that seem to lurk just beyond the periphery of our reality, to only make themselves known when they wish to instill terror within our hearts. These shadow people and phantom figures seem to have rooted themselves into our collective consciousness, and they are reported in both reality and myth across cultures. Sometimes threatening, sometimes merely creepy, but always frightening. These are unidentifiable beings that are difficult to classify and which seem to have stepped right out of our nightmares. One of the more enduring cases of such a phantom intruder is an intimidating, ominous black-cloaked figure that stepped forward from some dark place to terrorize a small town in Massachusetts, and which has remained a rather perplexing mystery to this day. It all began in October of 1939, in the town of Provincetown, on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in the United States, where frightened children began returning home from night with a scary story to tell. They claimed to have seen an extremely tall figure dressed all in black, which would appear out of nowhere to growl ominously and then to disappear just as suddenly in a flash. Some of these reports claimed that the thing had a hideous, deformed face and glowing eyes. Whatever it was they were seeing, the ghoulish phantom certainly terrified them, and children were known at this time to come home crying and shaking inconsolably. Yet, as obviously upset and shaken as these children were, the adults did not take it all very seriously. After all, this was the Halloween season, and it all seemed like just over-imagination or someone playing a prank with a Halloween costume. Then, one night a woman named Mary Costa was walking alone along shadowy streets past the city hall when she claimed that an impossibly tall figure, around 8 feet tall, had leaped out of some bushes to loom menacingly in front of her. The thing was described as having long, pointed ears and glowing eyes, which it used to coldly stare at the frightened woman for a moment before rapidly fleeing the scene in a series of inhuman, incredible leaps and bounds far beyond what a person should have been capable of. Costa claimed that she had run into a nearby coffee shop excitedly telling people about what she had just seen, and that some men had gone out looking for the mysterious intruder but had found nothing. Although police did not take this report very seriously at first, it was soon followed by similar accounts by other adult citizens. In all of the cases the shadowy apparition was claimed to be dressed in all black, complete with a flapping black cape, and to possess glowing eyes that were either red or silver, as well as long, pointed ears that were sometimes said to be of a silver color. It was also said that a weird buzzing noise like a very large insect accompanied it, and others said that it would let out a malevolent, unsettling laugh that was described as having an unearthly timbre and tone. It was also known for being extremely fast and agile, as well as for its purported superhuman jumping ability, with witnesses claiming that it could easily leap over high fences and could jump over 10 feet in a single bound. Curiously, police would often get different reports from different areas of town practically at the same time, suggesting that the thing was either incredibly fast, could somehow teleport, could fly, or that there were more than one of them. While most of these encounters involved the mysterious dark phantom merely startling or terrorizing witnesses before bounding away, something it seemed to take great pleasure in doing, others were decidedly more harrowing. In one case, a man named Charles Farley claimed that he had actually shot at the creature and hit it, but that it had been totally unfazed by the gunshot, simply laughing maniacally before nimbly jumping over a high fence with a single leap. Another man reported that he had been suddenly confronted and cornered by the entity and had instinctively thrown a punch at it. The being was claimed to have caught his fist in its own hand and then proceeded to crush the man's hand, breaking it, before hurling him to the ground effortlessly as if he were an unwanted toy. Yet another such violent encounter happened when another witness claimed that the creature had lashed out to strike him with breathtaking superhuman strength, sending him flying through the air, and there were other adult males who also reported being easily overpowered by the apparition. Other even more far-out accounts claimed that the thing had shot blue fire at them from its mouth. Before long, the town and indeed other areas were buzzing with talk of what people were starting to call the Provincetown Phantom, the Black Phantom, the Phantom Fiend, the Devil of the Dune, and the Black Flash, which was the name that the media would go with and would become the most popular name for the bizarre, spectral thing lurking about. Indeed, there were a variety of sensationalized reports of the Black Flash at the time in newspapers and on radio newscasts, which along with the increasing number of sightings really whipped people up into a panicked fervor. Speculation ran rampant on what it could be, with some saying it was just a prankster or a peeping Tom, and others saying it was some sort of supernatural entity such as a ghost or demon with an inscrutable agenda not of this world. Some particularly religious folk thought it was the devil himself. Making things even worse were the other bizarre and unsettling events orbiting the whole Black Flash fiasco. This was not long after the time when the 1938 Orson Welles CBS radio broadcast of War of the Worlds was aired, on Sunday, October 30, 1938, sending many parts of the country into a mass-frenzied panic. Further causing stress and uneasiness was the onset of World War II and its looming shadow of violence inexorably pulling America in, which seriously weighed on the nation's mind at the time, as well as the devastating effects of the Great Depression. There were various other weird goings-on at the time in the immediate area as well, such as news of a sea monster that had washed up on shore near Woodend and would later be identified as a rotting basking shark, as well as that of a serial arsonist who had terrorized the town in the September before the appearance of the enigmatic Black Flash. All of these converging events no doubt caused the Black Flash story to pulse, grow, and become sensationalized, with its various elements embellished and exaggerated in the notoriously overdramatized news reports and radio shows of the era, where it took on a life of its own in the minds of a populace whose imaginations were primed and their nerves frayed. The story typically goes that the Black Flash would supposedly go on to torment the people of Provincetown for 7 years, with reports going all the way up to 1945. In one such incident from November of 1945, a group of police officers apparently saw the Phantom leap over a 10-foot-high fence after they went to a schoolyard to investigate a series of sightings there. The following month, a group of children claimed that they had been attacked by the Black Flash and had escaped into their house to seek refuge, where they cowered as it banged on the walls and rattled doors. One man by the name of Louis Gennard allegedly got a hot pan of boiling water to throw at the creature, which sent it screaming off into the night and would mark this as purportedly the last reported incident of the Black Flash. These incidents up to 1945 are written of by researcher Joe Citro in his book Passing Strange, where he claims they were recounted to him by the folklorist Robert Cahill, who wrote of the Black Flash in a book called New England's Mad and Mysterious Men, in which he says the Phantom terrorized Provincetown for years. These details provided by Citro and Cahill have been widely referenced for stories on the Black Flash, but there has been some disagreement with this timeline. According to one of the foremost researchers of the Black Flash phenomenon, paranormal researcher Theo Pagemans, this timeline is false and he claims that these are details added later, that Cahill's work was substantially embellished, and that the Black Flash really only struck for a few weeks before vanishing. He wrote a heavily researched article in 2007 for the Anomaly journal Intermediate States and said of his findings, "I found the original accounts in the Provincetown Advocate and with the help of these accounts I was able to reconstruct a clear timeline and to throw out a lot of the stuff that had grown onto the Black Flash over the years, but was clearly fabrication." One of these inaccuracies was the timeline. The Black Flash did not strike between 1938 and 1945 as is often alleged, but only for a few weeks in 1939. Whatever timeline is correct, the question still remains, what was the Black Flash? Many theories have been proposed on the answer to this. It has not gone unnoticed that the Black Flash was in many ways similar to another mysterious phantom that had allegedly terrorized parts of Great Britain in 1837, a phantom known as Spring-Heeled Jack. There are several similarities between the two entities, such as glowing eyes, a black cloak, and the startling ability to make enormous leaps and bounds. This has caused some to suggest that the Black Flash and Spring-Heeled Jack were one in the same, or that they were the same sort of entity, but it could also mean that some of the details from reports were embellished or added to make it seem that way. Indeed, the relentless sensationalism of the case at the time, and the embellishments, additions, and exaggerations made over the years since, as well as the substantial lore it has accrued and surrounded itself with, have made it difficult to separate fact from fiction when it comes to the case of the Black Flash. Even researchers on the phenomenon can't seem to agree on what really happened or how long it lasted. Other ideas are that it was all a form of mass hysteria or collective delusion, with the media hype and spooky stories escalating until it had everyone in its grip, or even that it was some sort of demon, ghost, or vampire. Again, with all of the embellishments made and liberties taken with the tale in the news at the time and through rich oral traditions since, it is hard to know what parts or details of the story are even real, so it is hard to say how much merit any of these ideas have. There is simply no real concrete evidence that favors any one of these. For their part, authorities at the time were certain that it all stemmed from a malicious prank, and although news of the Black Flash was everywhere and many believed it was a real mysterious apparition, it seems that actually a lot of people in Provincetown itself concurred that it was most likely jokesters or a peeping Tom. Chief of Police Anthony Tavers even claimed to have known who the perpetrators were and how they did it. According to Tavers, it was 4 local boys who were playing a Halloween trick to scare everyone, and that they had accomplished it by one boy standing on another's shoulders and then covering themselves with a large black cape and wearing a mask. The 2 sets of boys were claimed to have coordinated their costumes and appearances in order to make it look like they were teleporting or dashing with preternatural speed around town. Tavers also said that he had even gone so far as to speak with the alleged culprits and their parents, and that this is why the whole phenomenon had ceased. However, he never did release the names of the perpetrators, and no one has ever claimed responsibility for the supposed hoax. The statement by Travers was also apparently not even really an official police pronouncement. The Black Flash's potent jumping ability, agility, strength, toughness, and other purported powers aren't really addressed with this theory either. This has led some to suspect that Tavers was merely making up this story to calm everyone down, or to cover up what was really going on. In the end, we have no way of knowing for sure. In the end, it is unclear what the Black Flash was. It isn't even really clear which elements of the story are true, which are complete fiction, or even how long the phenomenon actually went on for. The story has been picked up and written about in numerous articles and books, which often give different or even conflicting, contradictory information. With all of the tales and the mismatch of information out there on the Black Flash of Provincetown, just about all we can say for sure is that something was terrorizing the town in at least 1939. What that was, whether a prank, a mass delusion, a ghost, demon, alien, or vampire, or something else altogether, no one really knows. We probably never will. And the mystery of the Black Flash will likely remain in the shadows within the realm of speculation even as its legend grows. 1. The Phantom Whistler 1950. Phantoms haunt the pages of history. Strange, unsolved occurrences where a faceless attacker tormented a community for days, weeks, or even months before disappearing as suddenly as they came. Many cases of phantom attackers, such as that of the Halifax slasher, are instances of collective delusion, where the idea of a threat takes hold in a community and becomes part of the shared reality of that community. Other instances, such as the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula, are less clear-cut, more likely the work of a stranger on a rampage. Perhaps the strangest phantoms to lurk in the night struck not with razors or scissors, but with sound. The sleepy town of Paradis, Louisiana, was haunted in 1950 by a musical stranger who focused his attentions on one resident in particular, 18-year-old Jacqueline Cadeau. For months, the man known as the Phantom Whistler allegedly whistled wolf calls beneath her bedroom window. But when the young beauty decided to wed the love of her life, 26-year-old Louisiana State Trooper Herbert Belsom, the Phantom changed his tune, whistling a funeral dirge. Even more frightening, young Jacqueline received phone calls from the Whistler, filled with threats. One such phone call, quoted by Jacqueline's mother, said, "I'll kill her. I'll stick a knife in her. Your daughter will never marry Herbert." Louisiana State Police and the local sheriff's department investigated the strange reports, but little progress was made in finding the stalker. The drama caught the attention of the entire village, not to mention a lot of attention from outside. Police chafed at the unwanted attention, thinking the press and villagers would only egg on the stalker and make the investigation more difficult. Police stationed at the house could find no evidence of the whistler. No officer ever reported even hearing the whistling, though members of the kiddo family still claimed the whistler was outside. Even with the threats, Jacqueline went ahead with her wedding, marrying Herbert Belsom on October 1, 1950. The phantom whistler did not make good on his threats, and was never heard from again. Still, the mystery remains. Who was the phantom whistler? A jilted ex-lover? A stalker? A prankster? The truth may never be known for certain, but it is good to note that the sheriff of St. Charles Parish thought the whistler was nothing more than a hoax, going so far as to call the case an inside job. The sheriff never went on to elaborate on what he meant in saying the incident was a hoax, and he never explained who he thought had perpetrated the hoax, or why. Could the kiddo family have been the perpetrators? Or, perhaps, the whole incident was a small outbreak of collective delusion among the kiddo household, brought on by pre-wedding jitters? Without more information, it is impossible to tell for sure. The identity of the phantom whistler will remain an enigma.